All right, everybody, I want to welcome you to Pastor's Point of View number 257. Believe it or not, today is June 2nd. And so the year is almost halfway over. It's stunning. Today is June 2nd, 2023. My name is Dr. Andy Woods. I'm the pastor teacher here at Sugarland Bible Church. I'm back with my friend, colleague, fellow elder, associate pastor, Dr. Jim McGowan. And Brother Jim, prophecy keeps marching forward.
It sure does.
And
just
so,
like the year.
Just like the year. Good point. And so here's our 4-point outline we're going to walk through today as we help people with a prophecy update. Let's start with the, the famous or infamous, whatever word you want to use, Gog-Magog invasion. You'll notice our map here, and this is, of course, taken from Ezekiel 38 and 39, picturing in Ezekiel's great prophecy there, a great invasion that's connected to the end times. And two of the players are Russia, Rosh, and Persia or Iran. You notice we've got both circled. And as you know, one of the things we like to point out is, as a precursor to this, if this is really true, and if we're really living in the season of this invasion, wouldn't it make sense that Russia and Iran would cooperate with each other?
Indeed.
And develop ties? And so in that vein, you'll notice this article from ZeroHedge.com, May the 26th, 2023, Russian central bank governor visits Iran to strengthen financial ties. What's that article about?
Bank of Russia Governor Elvira Nabiullina visited Tehran for talks with her Iranian counterpart, Mohammad Reza Farzin. The talks focused on strengthening relations between commercial banks from the two heavily sanctioned countries, as well as increasing banking infrastructure cooperation. Iranian Central Bank Governor Farzin said, Nabiullina also participated in talks during the Asia Clearing Union meeting in Tehran, which Russia is attending as an observer along with officials from Belarus and Afghanistan. According to Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency, Iranian First Vice President Mohammad Makhbar discussed efforts with Nabiullina to eliminate the use of the dollar in transactions with Russia. Nabiullina's visit to Tehran follows an agreement reached in January between the Russian and Iranian central banks to improve financial and banking transactions between the two countries. State-owned VTB bank PJSC, Russia's second-largest lender, has since opened an office in Iran. Russia and Iran have increased economic and military cooperation in the face of Western sanctions. Last week, President Putin and Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi signed an agreement to build a railway line linking Russia to India through Iran.
So I find this very interesting on a lot of fronts because it talks here about Russia and Iran strengthening ties right down to banking.
Yeah.
You know, right down to the point where the two of them are entering into an economic relationship, you know, of such intimacy that they think they can dump the dollar.
Yeah.
Which is one of the concerns I've had for a long time. Eventually, the dollar is going to become so weak that it's not going to be the leading currency in the world anymore. And these nations are going to just start acting like, you know, the dollar doesn't exist at all. And once that happens, you can expect what's left of our dollar to plummet, you know, incredibly. And this is already happening, this dump the dollar mentality with the BRIC. We've covered the BRICS banking system.
Right.
So it's a movement away from the West to the East financially, which is what Bible prophecy predicts. It's a strengthening of Russia and Iran, Rosh and Persia, which is what Bible prophecy predicts.
Amen.
And one of the things that we've covered in prior PPOVs is the very last sentence here. Last week, President Putin and Iranian President Raisi signed an agreement to build a railway line linking Russia to India, you know, through Iran. And so whether you're talking about the weakening of the West financially, the strengthening of the alliance between Russia and Iran, any way you want to look at this, the stage is being set, would you not agree, for the fulfillment of God's word?
Well, Ezekiel 38 and 39 is just coming off the pages, isn't it?
It sure is. And article after article demonstrates this. And the hard part about putting a show like this together with our limited time frame is what to exclude.
That's right.
The news is just jumping right off the pages into prophetic fulfillment.
Wow.
Let's, just for the sake of time, let's move to our second category here, and this has to do with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, of course, is a irrational hatred, a hatred that doesn't make any sense from the human level of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You'll notice this screenshot here that we've used before, connecting Revelation 12 and anti-Semitism. If you want to understand anti-Semitism, all you have to do is read Revelation 12, verses 6 through 17. That's the prophecy about Satan receiving his final eviction notice from heaven. And this is midway through the tribulation period, and he goes down to the woman clothed with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars, a clear reference to Israel. When you factor in Joseph's dream, Genesis 37, 9, and 10, you'll see the same imagery there. And he goes down to her with great hatred, knowing that his time is short. And Satan's mindset is God has predicted that the kingdom is going to come to the world through Israel. I don't want the kingdom to come, because once the kingdom comes, I'll be bound for 1,000 years. So I'm going to stop the vessel through which the kingdom is going to materialize. And that's what God says is going to happen in the end times. And so in preparation for that, we would expect in our world, just prior to these events, that anti-Semitism would begin to increase. And certainly we see that, because now we're in the graduation season, and we've got all kinds of speakers at graduations across the country. And here is an article from the New York Post, written by Zach Williams and Alex Oliveira, May the 29th, 2023. This is a brand new law school grad who graduated from a law school that's, financed through taxpayers' money.
Right.
And the title of the article says, "Outraged Critics Rip CUNY." Now, CUNY stands for City University of New York Law School. Outraged critics rip CUNY law grads' hate-filled commencement speech and demand that billions, with a B, in tax dollars be stripped from the city of New York because of this outrageous speech this new law school grad gave. Help us with that article.
I thought commencement speeches were designed to encourage the graduating students, to motivate them to go out and conquer the world, so to speak, do right and do good. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, and she was chosen by her classmates.
What does that say?
and as you're going to see, her speech is about encouragement in a way, but it's let's encourage the revolution.
That's
now,
right.
What revolution is she talking about?
Well, here we go. Outraged critics are demanding City University of New York's billions of dollars in taxpayer funding be stripped away from or after a law grad delivered a hate-filled and dangerous commencement address ripping the New York Police Department, fascists, and Israel in her vitriolic May 12th graduation speech at the Public City University of New York's law school. Newly minted grad Fatima Musa Mohammed called for a revolution to take on the legal system's white supremacy while blasting city cops and the U.S. military and claiming Israel carries out indiscriminate murder. During her speech, Mohammed accused the school of having self-serving interests and said it continues to fail us, continues to train and cooperate with the fascist NYPD, the military, and continues to train Israeli soldiers to carry out that violence globally. She also called the U.S. legal system a manifestation of white supremacy that continues to oppress and suppress people in this nation and around the world. She urged her classmates to continue the revolution to effect change, using their rage as the fuel for the fight against capitalism, racism, imperialism, and Zionism around the world. City University of New York's 2023 budget amounted to about $4.3 billion, according to the Office of City Comptroller Brad Lander. Most of that funding comes from the state through its annual budget, although more than $600 million came from the city.
So, taxpayer money hard at work.
Yeah.
Beyond that, this is the climate of this law school, and I'm sad to say, Brother Jim, most law schools.
Sad.
And that's tragic because this is where our future politicians, leaders, legislators, governors, future presidents, etc., are likely to come from. It's no wonder Satan has infiltrated the climate of law schools, you know, the way he has. The philosophy of education in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. I think that was a Abraham Lincoln quote, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And what's very interesting to me is she uses the opportunity as the commencement speaker to move into critical race theory.
Yes.
So the NYPD is institutionally racist. In other words, they don't have racists in the NYPD. The whole system is racist, so let's tear it down. She criticizes the whole American legal system as being institutionally racist. And of course, the nation of Israel is institutionally racist. So notice that this critical race theory is used to cover the United States and Israel. And I've been saying this for a long time. The reason this critical race theory idea is so dangerous is the identical arguments that are being used to destabilize Israel as a modern nation state is the same arguments that they're using to destabilize the United States.
That's right.
So the United States began through genocide, we're told. Well, that's how Israel began. So whatever they're doing with this critical race theory, it covers both the United States of America and the nation of Israel. And this is just a stunning, hate-filled speech, all at taxpayers' expense. And this particular individual, it's a her, I believe, I'll remind her she's not a lawyer yet. She's a law school grad. She still has to pass the bar exam. And as a new lawyer, when I'm assuming she's going to pass it, assuming she becomes a new lawyer and is sworn in, I would highly recommend to her the work of Jacques Gautier, who I think we have a screenshot of it here, along with another book that's very important called From Time Immemorial by Joan Peters. And those two individuals and scholars prove legally that the nation of Israel is not doing anything wrong.
Right.
I mean, you can have whatever philosophy you want about Israel, but you can't say that she is some sort of illegal occupier.
Right.
And of course, it was Gautier, a Canadian lawyer, who wrote a large dissertation at the University of Geneva defending the legal rights of the nation of Israel. And he had hostile readers, and he spent, I think, a couple of decades on this project, and he had to, you know, as we say, cross every T and dot every I. So rather than just get up and spew a bunch of nonsense, maybe she should actually look into what the legal system actually says, and I would recommend the works of Joan Peters and Jacques Gautier to demonstrate that Israel is not doing anything illegal, contrary to what her hate-filled rhetoric says. But this is the type of insane, irrational anti-Semitism that will increase it in the end times. And the reason it's insane is because it doesn't come from ultimately a human source.
Right.
It comes from the realm of Satan.
That's
Would you add anything to that?
Just, you know, that there's an agenda here. And it does, I mean, even if this individual reads this book, which I doubt they would, they probably wouldn't come away with anything. Because they're already convinced in their own heart and mind that they're right.
And I actually might be the first, assuming they would watch a video like this, the first lawyer that would ever direct her to this source. I doubt she even knows that these sources of law or cares even exist. Well, cheer up, folks. It gets worse in this area of anti-Semitism. Notice Zechariah 12, verse 3. All
right, reading from the New American Standard 1995 update, Zechariah 12:3. It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it.
Now, a parallel passage is in Zechariah 14, if you don't mind reading just verse 2.
All right, Zechariah 14:2. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, and half of the city exiled, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city.
So those two passages, 500 years before Jesus ever walked the earth, predicted that in the end times, the entire world, all nations,
That's right.
would be gathered against Israel in general and the city of Jerusalem in particular. And that would even, if all means all, that would even include the late great United States of America.
Yeah.
Even our policies towards Israel, which have been friendly thus far, would start to shift. So with that being said, Brother Jim, the Biden administration is now in the process of developing a new definition of anti-Semitism.
Oh boy.
In other words, you can actually hate the concept of Zionism. Zionism being you believe in a spiritual, a moral, a legal right of the Jews to return to their ancient homeland. You can hate Zionism and still not be labeled an anti-Semite because they just took Zionism, or they're in the process of taking Zionism out of their new formulated definition of anti-Semitism. Hatred for Zionism is no longer anti-Semitism. And this is so upsetting that we have an organization called the Zionist Organization of America. In a very recent open letter to the president, May the 23rd, writing to the president, pleading with him not to go this direction. What does that letter say?
Dear Mr. President, on the eve of Passover 2023, you assured the Jewish community that you stand with them and that you are committed to the safety of the Jewish people. You recognized that the expression of Jewish hatred is, quote, a stain on the soul of our nation, and you committed our nation to condemning anti-Semitism at every turn. It is therefore imperative that your forthcoming action plan to combat anti-Semitism recognize the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism as the one and only official definition of anti-Semitism that will be used by the federal government. The IHRA definition has garnered wide acceptance in the United States and around the world for good reason. It is an excellent and crucial tool for understanding how anti-Semitism is expressed today, including when the hatred of Jews is masked as criticism of Israel. The definition includes a core description of anti-Semitism as a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Importantly, it also includes contemporary examples of anti-Semitism, including relating to Israel, which reflect the actual experiences of the Jewish community. The IHRA definition does not characterize all criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic. It expressly states that criticism of Israel, similar to that leveled against any other country, cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic. Groups of academics and activists have created other definitions of anti-Semitism, including the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism and the Nexus document. These definitions are deeply flawed, minimizing and even denying the fact that hatred of Jews is often expressed today as hatred toward the Jewish state of Israel. Including either one of these definitions in your action plan together with the IHRA definition would be a huge mistake, creating confusion instead of clarity about what constitutes anti-Semitism. Conflicting definitions of anti-Semitism in your action plan would hinder, not help our nation's important and necessary battle against all forms of Jew hatred. The JDA and the Nexus document are also dangerous, wrongly shielding anti-Semites who try to mask their hatred of Jews by expressing it as hatred for the Jewish state. For example, the Nexus document states that opposition to Zionism, i.e., the right of the Jewish people to self-determination and to live as a nation-state in their religious and ancestral homeland, is not necessarily anti-Semitic. The Nexus document fails to appreciate that for many, if not most Jews, their connection to their religious and ancestral homeland is an essential part of their Jewish identity. The Nexus document also states that disproportionate focus on Israel and treating Israel differently than other countries cannot necessarily be considered anti-Semitic. But if Israel, the one and only Jewish state in the world, is singled out for criticism and punishment, then there can be no doubt that anti-Semitism is at play. The JDA is even more problematic. It does not even recognize that anti-Zionism, i.e., denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, is anti-Semitism. The many flaws in these two definitions demonstrate why they, unlike the IHRA definition, lack wide acceptance around the world. The IHRA definition is the best resource for understanding the many ways that anti-Semitism is expressed today, which is the first step to effectively addressing this ugly bigotry. To protect the safety of the Jewish people and the soul of our nation, and to condemn anti-Semitism at every turn, we respectfully urge you to recognize the IHRA definition as the one and only official definition of anti-Semitism to be used by the federal government.
So they're moving away from what's called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance IHRA definition, and instead moving to other definitions of anti-Semitism. It mentions the JDA standard and others that comes up with a definition of anti-Semitism, the irrational hatred of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that is so narrow that you can hate Zionism and you can hate the modern state of Israel and not be anti-Semitic.
Right.
That's basically what's happening here.
Yeah.
And the Zionist Organization of America, you know, to their credit, you know, is speaking out against it. By the way, I'm not sure if we had a chance to put this map up here, but this map is a pictorial representation of the two scriptures you read earlier, that the world will turn against Israel.
That's
and
right.
Even as the United States moves to these new definitions, it seems like even the United States is becoming one of the many that is going to come against Israel in the last days. What would you say?
Well, I just say, as you look at that map right there, boy, don't you really want to hate Zionism? Yeah. You know, that little bitty dot.
Well, and that map is so instructive. That's why I like to use it over and over again, because Israel is so small. Obviously, she's not an oppressor, the way it was portrayed by this law school grad.
Exactly.
This Cooney, you know, harangue, I'll call it that.
That's what it is.
That she gave. And so they'll never show you that map, by the way, on any of the political shows.
Oh, no.
Because once people actually understand that map, they wouldn't fall for the propaganda that Israel is some imperial oppressor, some kind of genocidal power throughout the earth.
Well, we're showing it.
Yes, we are. That's why we keep showing it over and over again. All right, let's go, for the sake of time, let's go to our third category here. And it has to do with the mark of the beast technology. And of course, we typically reference at this point the infamous mark of the beast passage in Revelation 13, 16 through 18. And what does that say?
Revelation 13, 16 through 18. And he causes all, the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the free men and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For the number is that of a man, and his number is 666.
Now, at bare minimum, what this is speaking of is some sort of cashless system controlled by the Antichrist, where if you don't behave properly, you're locked out of the economy.
That's right.
No cash anymore. No more financial privacy. And of course, we don't believe that this system is currently up and running. It won't be up and running until the beast shows up.
Correct.
We don't have the beast yet, but certainly technology is moving us in this direction. And here is an issue, Brother Jim, called the digital wallet that we actually covered on Pastor's Point of View, number 255, and it just sort of builds on what we said there. It's dealing with our European passwordless future from Wired.com. And what does that article say?
All right. In 2024, the European Union is scheduled to unveil a new tool for seamless international travel, the Digital Identity Wallet. The app will store personal data such as passports, driver's licenses, and banking info for quick verification when crossing the border into any of the EU's 27 member countries, and for easy access to money while abroad. The platform is a response to growing demand for digital identity verification in Europe. In 2021, the EU's digital COVID certificate allowed citizens to easily share vaccination status via a QR code that could be printed out or displayed on a smartphone. In addition, 14 countries representing roughly 60% of the EU's population already have some kind of digitized national identification. The digital wallet will be the most ambitious rollout yet of a comprehensive digital ID system, combining security, compliance, and privacy safeguards for the EU's 447 million citizens. Quoting, "We want the EU to become the first global region with a governance framework for trusted digital identities," stated a member of the European Parliament in February. Quoting again, "The digital wallet will become a reliable, all-in-one identity gateway that puts citizens in full control of their own data and gives them the freedom to decide exactly what information to share, with whom, and when. A new driver of civic engagement and social empowerment, and a tool for inclusive digital Europe." The digital wallet is the latest, highest profile example of a worldwide trend, the demise of passwords and the rise of digital identities. In a December 2022 study of 1,450 global consumers by Entrust, a leader in secure identities, payments, and data, just 6% stated that passwords are the most secure method of identity verification online. And more than half said they needed to reset their passwords at least once a month because they forgot them. Nobody likes passwords, says Greg Wetmore, the vice president of software development at Entrust. Quoting, "They're awkward, not very useful, and easy to steal." Consumers want digital verification methods that easily and securely share information that's relevant for each interaction, leading to growth in platforms and methods that will transform our lives in the years ahead. Quoting again, "This technology is in its early phases," Wetmore says. "But there are really interesting pilot projects leading the change, and Entrust has found that ultimately the future of identification is hybrid, physical and digital."
So here we are, an all-in-one identity gateway.
Yeah.
And notice how this is being sold, the demise of passwords. We all struggle with trying to remember our password for this or password for that. Yeah. And my point is, this is how it's being sold as convenience.
Yep.
Of course, once you're into the system, your privacy is gone because there's a record of everything you're doing.
That's exactly right.
Cash is gone. And I don't know if I like, but I wanted to emphasize this sentence here by a European Parliament member. We want the EU to become the first, and you put an emphasis on it too, global region with a governance framework. And we've talked about the doctrine or the concept of regions. Eventually the World Club of Rome will divide the world into 10 regions, Europe being one, and that will be sort of the structure, we think, that will lead to the future New World Order and the coming of the Antichrist. You'll notice this chart here of the dream that Nebuchadnezzar saw. It's actually a picture of it. The head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of bronze, the legs of iron. These are all representing different pagan powers that would trample down Israel during the times of the Gentiles, but not legs of iron, ancient Europe. And then the feet mixed with iron and clay, the 10 toes, in other words. And we don't believe that we've seen the 10 toes yet. We believe that the legs are distant past, but coming up out of the cultural inheritance of ancient Rome will be these 10 toes mixed with iron and clay, which ultimately will be destroyed by the coming of the kingdom of our Lord Jesus Christ. But you'll notice that the feet are connected to the legs. And if the legs is Europe, it stands to reason that this coming future New World Order would somehow be Eurocentric.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think it's very interesting that this digital wallet is currently being beta tested, in Europe. And, these articles on technology just keep coming. Here's a second one. It says, get ready for a world ID and WorldCoin universal basic income, offering free money in exchange for your eyeball scan. So just get your eyeball scanned and you're entitled to what's called something that the globalists, I think, want to bring in, and they have talked about this for a while, something called mincome, which is some sort of guaranteed minimal income for all of the inhabitants of the world. Global socialism, in other words. What does that article say?
Well, I have to preface this by commenting on what you said about, we're not saying that we see the toes, but we sure are starting to smell them, aren't we?
Yes, we sure are.
All right, here we go. While the American public and even some U.S. politicians have been sounding the alarm recently over the dangers of the potential future rollout of central bank digital currencies and the loss of all privacy in any financial transactions, a new blockchain financial network that was launched in 2019 before COVID has been gaining momentum here in 2023 and is now being used in dozens of countries around the world with over 1.5 million users. And it is now being launched in the United States. World ID with the WorldCoin cryptocurrency. World ID is not some concept for the future. It is already here and already being used around the world with the World app and WorldCoin for both financial transactions and World ID checks. Why have so many people around the world so quickly signed up for a World ID? Because they are being offered free cryptocurrency and in some cases even free money in their local currencies by using their new World ID. And what do they have to do to receive this free money? They just have to have their eyeballs scanned by the WorldCoin orb, which will then create their unique World ID. The stated goal of WorldCoin and World ID is to reach the 50% of the world that currently has no form of ID and cannot therefore participate in the global economy. They believe that cryptocurrency is the way to distribute universal basic income, but to do so, they need to enroll people in the World ID program and to make sure that each person on the planet can only have one World ID and not scam the system. They use biometrics to prove that they are humans with a single ID. The biometric that they chose was an eye scan, which required them to build a special hardware device to scan people's eyes called the orb. Notice how they claim that WorldCoin is designed for privacy. But how could a system like this actually protect your privacy? Maybe they will protect your privacy from the rest of the world, except hackers, but your privacy is most certainly not being protected from Sam Altman and other big tech billionaires who run the system.
Okay, just for the sake of time, I'll interrupt you there, but you'll notice that we've been talking about CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and we've been talking about the dangers associated with those. Yep. This article says, oh, that's yesterday's news.
That's right.
Forget the CBDCs. This world orb eye scan is where the action is. And they talk about how this is actually going to be used as a device for something called universal basic income. I prefer the expression MINCOME, minimum income. I mean, we're doing all of this for compassion, don't you know? And people want to get their eye scanned because they're being offered the goodies if they get their eye scanned, particularly in the third world.
Yeah. And
so once your eye is scanned, you're locked into the system. And you get all the goodies. You supposedly get the MINCOME and the CBDCs. That's, you know, yesterday's business. But the truth of the matter is, you see how all of this is, whether it's going to be the CBDC route or the route espoused by this WorldCoin universal basic income eyeball scan. No matter how you slice it, we're moving into a one-world cashless system. I mean, technology itself has allowed for that, and we're now moving into a system that is being beta tested, but it's ultimately going to be globalized.
You know, Pastor, as I saw that, you know, you mentioned this. This says it first targets the poorest members of society. Why is that important? Because they're going to give them free money.
Absolutely.
And they're going to get their loyalty.
And who wouldn't want free money?
Who would?
And if you don't have enough education to understand that every time you get something for free from the government, there really isn't like the gospel, which is free.
That's right.
There's some kind of strings attached, and you're totally dependent on this system. And if you don't behave correctly, which is the real goal, you can be shut out of it. I mean, you can't buy or sell, which is exactly what the Bible predicts for the end of the age. But this idea that the world through this is going to be given this basic minimal income, we're already being prepared for that.
Yes, we are.
Notice this article from the Times.com, one of our international sources of news, and it says 3.7 million benefit claimants, in other words, people that are on the dole, if we can put it that way, receiving money from the government, are told that they no longer have to seek work. Now that's preparation, is it not, for a minimum income for the planet? You don't have to be self-sufficient. You can spend your entire life on some kind of, you know, very minimal basic income that the government provides. What does that say?
Here we go, folks. Nearly 4 million people in the UK are receiving benefits without having to look for work, according to recent figures compiled by a think tank. Analysis by the Center for Social Justice found that 3.7 million of the 5.2 million people claiming out-of-work benefits have been granted an exemption from finding a job. I must just add an addendum to this. All of those that would really like to have this type of thing, please move to UK as soon as possible.
Yeah, and the reason that all of these appeals by the globalists are so attractive to people is it's a way out of the curse. It's a way out of the fall.
Yeah.
One of the things the World Economic Forum is working on, supposedly, that Klaus Schwab talks about this, is they're trying to circumvent death itself. Well, that's a way around the fall, because God says the day you eat from the tree thereof is the day you shall surely die. The mortality rate, the last time I checked, is basically 100%.
That's right.
Death is still coming for people, one per customer, because of the fall that happened in Eden. Well, Klaus Schwab says here's a way around the fall in Eden. And this idea that you don't have to work to survive, that's a way around the fall as well, because one of the repercussions of the fall in Genesis chapter 3 is now you have to work for your survival.
That's right.
You've got to work by the sweat of your brow. Remind us of those scriptures. One of them is in Genesis 3:17 through 19.
Genesis 3:17 through 19. Then to Adam, that's God, said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread, till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return.
See, it's interesting. Adam was working prior to the fall. He was tilling the garden.
Yeah.
Genesis chapter 2, taking care of the garden. But now it's different. The fall has occurred. Man has sinned against God, and now he has to work to survive.
That's
and
right.
It's the siren song of socialism is, no, you don't. You don't have to work to survive. The government will take care of you. Paul says something about this too, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
2 Thessalonians 3, verse 10.
All right, 2 Thessalonians 3:10. For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order. If anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward.
And I think the reason why this coming global socialism, that looks to me like the Antichrist system to me. That's my best description of it. One world socialism, one world Marxism, redistribution of the wealth, always done in the name of convenience or compassion, supposedly. One of the reasons it's not going to work, it's ultimately going to fail, because it rebels against the principles of the Creator.
Amen.
In Genesis 3.
That's right.
That's why you have no example of a successful socialist or Marxist experiment. And these globalists say, well, we've only tried it in different nations that have failed. Maybe if we try it over the whole world, it will succeed. Well, it will fail just like they all fail, because it rebels, against God's principles himself.
Yeah.
Quoting the late Margaret Thatcher, she basically said the problem with socialism is you run out of OPM, other people's money.
That's
and,
right.
and it always looks good on paper. But reality and what sounds good in a college classroom, are two different things.
That's true.
And so these technologies that they're advancing are moving us into this ultimately one world system, which will be one world enslavement. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, sir, that's right on.
All right, well, with that being said, let's go to our fourth and final category for today. Persecution, and the verse we've been using as kind of the biblical entry point to describe the coming global persecution is Revelation 17, verse 6, describing the harlot, which is a one world religion coming from a city in the last days. And what does Revelation 17 and verse 6 say?
All right, Revelation 17:6 says, and I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly.
It's really a stunning verse on persecution against God's people in the tribulation. The woman, the Antichrist system, is literally going to be drunk with the blood of the saints. And when you look at our chart here entitled Tribulation Judgments, we, as of late, have been focusing on the fifth seal judgment. And you see when that will likely occur in the tribulation period very early on. And then you look at this list here, first 6 seal judgments. Here we're focusing on seal judgment number 5, which is speaking of martyrdoms.
Yes.
And then you look over at Matthew chapter 24 and Revelation 6 parallels, because we largely see the Olivet Discourse being parallel with the tribulation period.
Yes.
And you'll notice in the 5th birth pang, just like in the 5th seal judgment, there's going to be massive martyrdoms.
Yep.
In fact, what does Matthew 24 and verse 9 say?
All right, Matthew 24, verse 9. Then they will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name.
That would be the fifth birth pang, which we think correlates with the fifth seal judgment. Yes. What does Revelation chapter 6 and verse 9 say?
Revelation 6:9. When the Lamb broke the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained.
So you put all of these scriptures together, and it's talking about global persecution against God's people.
Yes.
So like all of these signs, they're not just going to happen in a vacuum.
Right.
I mean the stage, the pretext, whatever you want to call it, has to be put in place first, as stage setting for these prophecies ultimately to be fulfilled. And so that's why I found that this article from Newsbusters is informative, but it's tragic at the same time, because it describes how by the Biden administration, just as they're changing the definition of anti-Semitism, they're changing the definition of terrorism.
Yes, they are. And
this article is entitled, How Biden's DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is Weaponizing an Anti-Terror Program against Christians and conservatives and the GOP, written May the 25th, 2023. This actually deals with grants that the government is giving to different academic institutions to sort of create seminars and literature warning people against terrorism, domestic terrorists.
Wow.
Well, they just expanded the definition of what a domestic terrorist is. And
yes, they did.
You read the list, and suddenly Brother Jim, myself, and you could easily be labeled as domestic terrorists. So what does that article say?
MRC Free Speech America, as a part of its new Freedom of Information Act investigations, has learned how the Biden administration is weaponizing a government-funded anti-terrorism grant program in an effort to destroy conservatives, Christians, and the Republican Party. Under the Trump administration, the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant Program was used to prevent terrorism, but it was revamped under the Biden administration and renamed to provide funding for localities to combat all forms of terrorism and targeted violence. Instead of focusing on preventing actual violence and terrorism, the program is now being used to target the entire spectrum of the political right and Christians through, quote, media literacy and online critical thinking initiatives and other so-called training seminars as part of a coordinated effort to make America into a one-party system. The University of Dayton, one of several grantees, targeted groups including the Heritage Foundation, Fox News, Christian Broadcasting Network, Turning Point USA, PragerU, the National Rifle Association, Breitbart News, the American Conservative Union Foundation, and the Republican National Committee. For example, a chart used by DHS and its grantee in a training program equates mainstream groups with militant neo-Nazis, including, again, the same groups, Heritage Foundation, Fox News, National Rifle Association, Breitbart, PragerU, Turning Point, Christian Broadcasting Network, American Conservative Union, and the Republican National Committee, among others. The seminar also compared former President Donald Trump to Pol Pot and suggested Florida Governor Ron DeSantis might wish to start a second Holocaust.
Unbelievable.
Prior iterations of the TVTP program under former Presidents Obama and Trump focused on actual terrorism. The grant office was established under the Obama administration in 2011 with a 12-page plan titled Empowering Local Partners to Prevent Violent Extremism in the United States. The program was revamped and renamed the Office of Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention under the Trump administration. Mayorkas and Biden appear to have hijacked it for their own political agenda, awarding 80 grants to far-left projects for the purposes of establishing media literacy and online critical thinking initiatives, among other so-called training seminars to upend conservatives, Christians, and the Republican Party.
So they've just taken the definition of domestic terrorist and they've now included everybody that's a conservative.
Yeah.
So let's put that chart up again. You look at this chart, and this is from their own published, materials. I mean, I see a Nazi swastika there. Okay, I get it. They could easily be labeled as domestic terrorists. But then I keep reading here, and it says Breitbart. Domestic terrorists. Don't we quote from Breitbart a lot in our news show?
Yep.
Prager University is a domestic terrorist. Alex Jones InfoWars. I don't always agree with Alex Jones on everything, but I certainly wouldn't put him in the category of being a domestic terrorist. And you keep reading here, and it talks about the American Conservative Union Foundation. Domestic terrorist. Fox News. Domestic terrorist. The Heritage Foundation. The John Birch Society. Look at this, Brother Jim. You like this one. The NRA.
Yeah.
National Rifle Association. Domestic terrorists. Boy, isn't that the insignia for the Republican Party there on the bottom right?
I believe so. So I'm 3 times a terrorist.
And then, now notice this, CBN. What does that stand for? Christian. Let me say that again. Christian. Did I get the point across? Christian Broadcasting Network. So if you're a Christian and you like a certain Christian perspective on the news, you are a domestic terrorist, according to this training now being advanced by the Biden administration. And I want to make something very, very clear. There's a reason why this domestic terrorist nomenclature is so significant, because once you're labeled a domestic terrorist, you're tried under the Patriot Act, which doesn't have the same constitutional protections that the rest of the Constitution has for criminal defendants. Just ask the J6 protesters, who are still, many of whom are still languishing in the American gulag, if I can put it that way, because they were tried under the Patriot Act. And so they're basically taking anybody that would dare object to the Biden administration, and they're labeling them as domestic terrorists. And of course, I believe, and we believe, that this is largely a legal pretext that they're now putting into existence, which will lead to tremendous persecution of Christians in the United States of America, and will pave the way ultimately for global persecution under the Antichrist. Concerning this cancel culture that we're now in, the evangelist Franklin Graham is speaking out, and this is our final article. It comes from the Washington Times, May the 23rd, 2023. It says, Franklin Graham warns of data bank cancellations of Christian ministries.
Evangelist Franklin Graham warned Christian broadcasters of a coming storm of demonic criticism that could cancel their cloud data storage and bank accounts, key elements of business and ministry in the digital age. In recent years, sudden closures of bank accounts and terminations of other critical services have plagued some conservative organizations, both secular and religious. For example, the National Committee for Religious Freedom, founded by a former Kansas senator and governor, Sam Brownback, had its Chase bank accounts shut down without explanation last year. Mr. Graham, who heads the international relief charity Samaritan's Purse, said he's had to take steps to avoid being canceled on short notice, addressing the National Religious Broadcasters Convention Monday evening. Mr. Graham, 70, told his audience about the growth of Samaritan Purse, where he became president at age 28. He said donor records were kept on file cards in the early years of his tenure, then on a small computer system. Now, ministry data resides in the cloud. But large corporations such as Amazon own the cloud and can cancel service abruptly, he said. When he asked how many organizations at the convention use Amazon Web Services, hands shot up throughout the crowd, quoting, "If you can't store your data and you can't retrieve your data, your organization is not going to last much longer," he said. Mr. Graham said cancellation could happen to any organization sharing the Christian message, quoting, "Now, if you don't preach the gospel, you don't have anything to worry about," he said. "If you're not going to talk about sin, you don't have anything to worry about. But if you're going to try to preach and proclaim the gospel, they're going to try to shut you up. Guys, listen," Mr. Graham told the audience, "those junior people, guess what, are going to be in the next 5 or 10 years the senior people." The evangelist said that those who are offended when Christians call the LGBTQ lifestyle a sin, quote, "are coming out about universities, and they're going into businesses, and they're getting into corporate leadership where they can cancel groups they oppose. Just don't sit there on your hands and let the storm hit, and then have this look on your face like, 'I didn't know that was coming. I didn't see that coming.' You better see it coming. The world hates us. And Jesus told us the world hated me first, and they're going to hate you," Mr. Graham said. "If you stand for Christ, the world hates you."
So he's basically talking about at age 28, he became the head of Samaritan's Purse, and he remembers everything being done, with file cabinets and paper. And he goes, "I'm age 70 now. It's all different. Everything is stored electronically. It's in the cloud." Who owns the cloud? Amazon owns the cloud.
That's right.
And they can push a button in the cloud, whatever you have stored in the cloud disappears. And he says here, if you can't store your data and you can't retrieve your data, not to mention your money in the bank, your organization is not going to last much longer. And they've already done this to Sam Brownback, who was a former senator and governor, no lightweight, had its Chase bank accounts shut down without explanation. And he talks about within 5 to 10 years, all of these teeny boppers, that are coming out of these colleges, like the law school grad we referenced earlier, that apparently don't believe in the First Amendment. They don't have any concept of free speech. They're going to be in charge of the cloud.
That's right.
These people are the ones that are going to be pushing the buttons, determining if your organization is going to continue or not. I like what he says here. If you're just some kind of innocuous organization that doesn't care about the Bible, you're safe.
Yeah.
This is only going to be applied to biblicists, people like us, gospel preachers. And so, of course, this is all a pretext for the coming, what we believe, persecution of the church. So that's our prophecy update for today as we've looked at the Gog-Magog issue, anti-Semitism, mark of the beast technology, and what the Bible says about persecution. By way of good news, could you read our faithful verse that we've read many times, Titus 2:13?
Thank God for good news, folks. Titus 2:13. "Looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Christ Jesus."
See, the conditions of the world is exactly the way they're supposed to be, according to what God predicted prior to the end of the age. And everything is falling into place, as has been said before, not falling apart.
Yes.
The good news in the whole thing is Jesus has promised before God's wrath hits planet Earth, there's a promise that he's made to us that he's going to come to rescue us from the world via the rapture before the wrath of God hits. And people can be dialed into this promise by placing their trust, even as I'm speaking, into Jesus Christ alone for their salvation and the safekeeping of their soul. They can do that now, even as I'm speaking. Just a few infomercials by way of conclusion. There's a prophecy conference coming up at the end of August, August 25th and 26th in nearby, for us anyway, Rockwall, Texas. It's about, 4 or 5 hours away. And it's going to be hosted by Tom Hughes, myself, Olivier Melnick, Bill Frederer, many others are going to be speaking at this conference. So we would invite people to investigate it by going to the Hope for Our Times website. Please also access our app, as all of the studies, including this one, that we upload regularly on that app. Also, Pastor's Point of View is available in podcast format. Just go to wherever it is you get your podcasts and type in my name into the search engine. And this PPOV, along with all of the others, that we have done, is available in podcast format. And also, if you're interested in our show notes, go to the website, andywoodsministries.org.
Yes.
On the homepage, there's a way to sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter is the show notes, and every time we post a show like this for PPOV, the show notes will show up in your inbox. And also, I'm the president of a school, Chafer Theological Seminary. If you desire seminary training, please investigate Chafer. Our summer term is about ready to begin. There's still time to enroll.
Yes.
So go to www.chafer.edu. That's all we have for today, folks. And thank you for listening and watching and sharing. And we'll see you next time on Pastor's Point of View. God bless you.
God bless.